What I unveil today will mark a new era for the Empire. We will be able to decimate the rebels just as we did the Jedi Knights. At last, the Emperor's war will be filled only with the glory and beauty of decisive victory.
Even if the line you just heard wasn't familiar, the idea behind it is probably a little familiar when it comes to Imperial tech. That was General Rom Mak, who spearheaded the allegedly fearsome Dark Trooper project in the Star Wars Legends continuity. What he was saying there sounds a little bit like what we've heard on so many other occasions about Imperial weapons tech, with claims that each new development brought them one step closer to galactic domination. We all know marketing is key to having a successful product, which is why I get so many emails from random garbage AI tools to sponsor videos for a lot of money, which I have sadly from my car loan always turned down. But when it comes to claims of Imperial weapon capabilities, it's not rare for fans to buy the hype almost as much as Kuat drive yards and Balmoran Arms investors in-universe, overemphasizing the importance of a single project which ultimately goes down the same trajectory every time. The Dark Trooper project is just one example of this, but it's the case study we're mostly looking at today. This project, as we typically know it, was primarily active just after the Battle of Yavin, though it had its roots in the Dark Trooper Phase Zero project much earlier. This brutal project, the Phase Zero version explained in the Force Unleashed campaign guide, saw a younger Rom Mak employing technology similar to what Palpatine used to reconstruct Vader. I've covered this and some other similarly horrifying projects in another recent video, so I won't spend too much time on that element. I will just add a quick correction that the shadow droids I mentioned in that video actually may have been produced after Dark Empire per the Scavenger's Guide to Droids, and that actually kind of loops back into our topic for today in some ways. I said in that video that they stopped after Dark Empire. Anyways, once we get to the Dark Troopers, Phase 1 through 3, and their destruction by Kyle Katarn, we can kind of see what the project really was, a decent set of battle droids and mech suits, but not something which alone could stop a galactic empire from military overreach and quell all opposition as it arose across the galaxy. Kyle Katarn ultimately disrupted most of the supply chain for the Dark Troopers, from shutting down the mines and refineries used for their Frick armor, which is the name of the alloy, not me swearing, to the final destruction of Mak himself and the Arc Hammer, where the droids were actually produced. And this was all just one case study in the kind of back and forth weapons development and weapons destruction going on during the Galactic Civil War. The Empire would make some new type of weapon under the Department of Military Research or some other group, and the Rebellion would come along to like this video and subscribe for more while trying to shut down whatever the program was. One of the key parts here, though, is that the importance of Kyle shutting down this weapon gets somewhat overstated. This was certainly a blow to the weapons development program and a big win for the Rebellion, causing significant expense for the Empire, but as one of my fellow Thrawn's Revenge devs, Nolan Starr, pointed out in the suggestion which led to this video, the Dark Troopers aren't exactly unique in their capabilities, nor was this even really the end of the Dark Troopers. After the destruction of the Arc Hammer, the project was defunded by Palpatine, who was already upset after the loss of the first Death Star, which was also a little bit expensive, but it wasn't really the end of the troopers themselves. Some which had already been developed were still deployed in various locations, and it's also possible some other sites sprung up, producing some of the troopers we see in post-Dark Forces appearances. Many different variants get looped into the Dark Trooper project by a variety of sources beyond the usual Phase 0 through Phase 3, including like a dozen from Star Wars Galaxies, the first MMO, and even the Purge Troopers from the Force Unleashed. The existence of these indicate to me at least some wider production than just what the Arc Hammer was making, even if the destruction of the Arc Hammer meant the end of them as a core part of Imperial forces going forwards. Many, like the Glory-class Dark Trooper, ultimately end up as sentries more often than frontline combat troops, likely in no small part because of the nature of guerrilla warfare against the Rebellion. These Dark Troopers needed to be put in places where the Rebellion was likely to strike. But if the Dark Troopers really were the answer to all of the Empire's problems, rather than just one of many types of Special Forces Trooper or Shock Troopers, then it would have been easy for the Empire to put those resources back into it. Despite what Rom Mak said, these really were just one of many projects. So like the Shadow Droid mistake I brought up earlier, the fact that the Dark Trooper faded into obscurity kind of just shows the promise of these programs relative to the outcomes, more so than the initial destruction being some catastrophic event that prevented making them going forwards. The biggest case for this is the Death Star. Fear of the battle station did not in fact keep the local systems in line, and fear of the Dark Troopers didn't accomplish that either. With every single one of these projects, there's always some sentiment that the only thing which stopped it from saving the Empire was that more resources weren't just poured into the project. We see it with the Dark Troopers, as well as other weapons like the TIE Defender, and even the Lancer, as if one specific weapon type would be enough to stop or win the war. Even if we do look purely at the military elements of the Galactic Civil War, not the elements of the Empire's political structure which make it fragile, I'm not trying to downplay the importance of continuing weapons developments in that context, but I think the way this is generally approached in the New Jedi Order series and the Yuuzhan Vong War shows a much more realistic set of expectations of how each project could play out compared to the extravagant promises of the Imperial weapons developers. Throughout the New Jedi Order, each side, the New Republic and the Yuuzhan Vong, are able to develop new tech and strategies to adapt to how the enemy fights. On the New Republic side, they learn how to fire through the Yuuzhan Vong's black hole-based Dovin basal shields, and that's a big deal, as is the Yamsk Jammer, a technology that's able to interrupt communication between Yuuzhan Vong ships during battles. The closest thing to something like the Dark Trooper project is the Yuuzhan Vong hunter droids made by Lando, which are able to help identify Yuuzhan Vong infiltrators, and are quite good at just fighting Yuuzhan Vong generally. Each of these turns a few battles, but they're specific adaptations to a broader strategic setting, with key elements relating to their effectiveness in that specific conflict, rather than anyone just saying, I have made the perfect overall weapon of war, now give me 16 trillion credits to fund it. Lando's the one who gets closest to that, but we already know he's a business guy doing shady business things. And while the Yuuzhan Vong hunter droids are effective, nobody buys into them thinking that they are the solution to the war in and of themselves. They're just especially good for things like security. Han Solo lampshades this Imperial tendency in the New Jedi Order series as well, specifically in Destiny's Way by Walter John Williams. An Imperial named Vanna Dorja says the Empire would have easily won the Yuuzhan Vong War by mobilizing their forces more effectively than the New Republic had. Han takes issue with that, saying, quote, "What the Empire would have done was build a super-colossal Yuuzhan Vong-killing battle machine. They would have called it the Nova Colossus or the Galaxy Destructor or the Nostril of Palpatine or something equally grandiose. They would have spent billions of credits, employed thousands of contractors and subcontractors, and equipped it with the latest in death-dealing technology. And you know what would have happened? It wouldn't have worked. They'd forget to bolt down a metal plate over an access hatch leading to the main reactors, or some other mistake, and a hotshot enemy pilot would drop a bomb down there and blow the whole thing up. Now that's what the Empire would have done." So while Han is talking specifically about one giant mega project superweapon here, I think the same kind of mentality seeps its way throughout most Imperial weapons tech. Rather than just say something is good at one job as a small part of the bigger puzzle, the PR machine goes into full swing and everything becomes the one key to end the war. Then if it's a big superweapon, it blows up. If it's a smaller craft, the production facility blows up, and it's a similar impact to the station blowing up. Redundancy and resiliency really just aren't terms that the Imperials like to associate with their projects. And at the end of the day, all you get is another breach in the Empire's actual best armor against the rebellion, the appearance of invulnerability. If you set up a bunch of targets saying this is the reason you can't win, and then that thing loses, even if it scares people at first, you're still just the one setting up for your own faceplant later. Instead, they need to go for the Monty Python Black Knight approach. Don't advertise these weapons as being as important as your right arm. Just say it's a flesh wound and move on. That's going to do it for today though. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.